On August 15, 1947, 200 years of British rule in India officially ended, but the transition to independence was instantly marked by the beginning of a massive, coordinated slaughter. In the days that followed, 1 million people were murdered and 15 million were displaced. Families fleeing across the new borders often arrived at their destination as corpses, carried by trains that had become mobile graveyards. The borders themselves were the result of 5 weeks of work by Sir Cyril Radcliffe, a British lawyer with no knowledge of Indian culture or geography. Using a paper map, he drew a line that arbitrarily severed thousands of villages and homes. Families who had shared the same streets for generations suddenly found themselves redefined by their faith, transformed into enemies of their own neighbors. This collapse was the endgame of a political strategy nearly a century in the making. To find the origin of this design, we have to look to the first major threat the British faced on the subcontinent. In 1857, Hindu and Muslim soldiers launched a massive, unified rebellion against the East India Company. This uprising proved different communities could set aside their religious differences to challenge British authority. The rebellion centered on the Enfield P-53 rifle. Soldiers were ordered to bite open greased cartridges that they believed were coated in cow and pig fat, an act that violated the core religious laws of both Hindu and Muslim troops. The British managed to suppress the revolt, but emerged with a new understanding of their vulnerability. They realized that Indian nationalist unity was a direct threat to the survival of the empire. In 1905, they launched a counterstrike by partitioning the province of Bengal. This administrative boundary was specifically designed to separate the large Muslim populations in the east from the Hindu populations in the west. Colonial officials told the Muslim minority that this division was necessary for better governance, promising them unique political benefits and direct government attention that they would supposedly never receive in a unified Bengal. This use of administrative borders effectively split the nationalist movement, planting the first structural seeds of religious division. In 1906, the All India Muslim League was formed with British support. It was intended to serve as a religious alternative to the Indian National Congress, ensuring the two major communities would maintain separate political agendas. The motive behind this support was captured in a letter by the Viceroy, Lord Minto. He admitted the administration was planting a bitter harvest in Indian politics to keep the populations divided and manageable. In 1909, the Morley-Minto reforms introduced separate electorates. This law legally forced the Indian public to vote within distinct religious blocs. Muslims could now only vote for Muslim candidates. This removed any incentive for politicians to seek support outside of their own religious group, making cross-communal cooperation a political liability. By making faith the only path to political power, the British replaced secular nationalist momentum with communal competition. Muhammad Ali Jinnah began his career as a champion of a secular, unified India. For years, he was known as the ambassador of Hindu Muslim unity within the Congress Party. That stance changed after 1937, when the Muslim League suffered a major electoral defeat. Encouraged by letters from the poet Allama Iqbal, Jinnah began to fear that Muslims would be permanently sidelined in a Hindu-majority democracy. By 1940, Jinnah adopted the two-nation theory. He argued that Hindus and Muslims were two distinct civilizations that could never coexist, and he formally demanded a separate state, Pakistan. In 1946, as negotiations with the British stalled, Jinnah issued an ultimatum for a divided India or a destroyed India. He called for a day of direct action to prove the League's resolve. The result was the Great Calcutta Killings. Political leaders in Bengal sat back as armed mobs slaughtered civilians, turning the city into a theater of communal terror. This street violence convinced the remaining political leaders that a unified India was no longer possible. They accepted partition as the only way to avoid a total collapse into civil war. Lord Mountbatten arrived in 1947 with orders to leave India as quickly as possible. He forced through the June 3rd Plan, which officially split the country into the independent nations of India and Pakistan. Independence was officially declared on August 15th, but the actual border locations weren't revealed until 2 days later. Millions of people suddenly found themselves on the wrong side of a border they couldn't see, fueling a wave of panicked migrations. Beyond the partition lines, the British left behind over 500 independent princely states. Each ruler was given the power to choose their own allegiance, a decision that threatened to fragment the subcontinent into hundreds of tiny, warring countries. Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel took on the task of unifying these states. He traveled across the country, using a combination of diplomacy and political pressure to convince these rulers to join the Indian Union. When diplomacy failed, Patel used force. He deployed the military to secure Hyderabad and used intense political pressure to bring Junagadh into the fold, refusing to allow the map to be shattered further. Through these actions, Patel secured the borders of modern India, preventing the British departure from resulting in the total disintegration of the region. Patel preserved the territory, but the partition remains a permanent scar on the subcontinent. It stands as a record of the human cost that follows when religious identity is used as a tool of political control.